What up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a full build of the QAV-S. This is a Lume frame from the Get FPV Crate subscription, guys. Basically, this whole build is, for the most part, I got most of these parts on Black Friday from their website. They had a bunch of killer deals. But yeah, we're going to be doing the QAV-S frame. It's a sweet little frame. It's all loose right now because of yeah, I see a part moving in there. I just slapped it together to do a frame review. If you want to know more about this frame in depth, we already did a review on that. It's on the channel. You can check it out. I'll leave a link in the description for that. We got a Hobbywing 40 amp 4-in-1 ESC. I did not buy this from FPV Crate. I got a Vista. We're putting a Vista in there as well. It's got a 20 by 20 mounting in the back there for it. But everything else I did get from the FPV Crate Club. We're going to be running these skids. This is my first time checking these out. They look pretty cool, though. They're skids that go on the bottom of the frame, and they got LED lights in them. Look pretty sweet. Got the Mini F7 Tmotor flight controller from them as well. This was on sale as well. And then they had these motors, the Xilo Stealth. These are 2206, 1750, or excuse me, 1700 kV motors. We're putting that in there. Plus, I designed some 3D prints. Got a GoPro mount for the 8. What else do we get? A Vista crate. I haven't decided what color I was going to go with. I was printing a bunch of different colors. I designed some arm skids as well too if you want. I'm not going to be running these, but because I'm using the skids, but I'll put these up on Thingiverse for anybody who wants them. Yeah, I'm just starting to design stuff, so some things can be improved, but they work. They fit pretty good. They snap on there nice and tight. They're not going anywhere. And yeah, they'll definitely protect your... See if I can get it to focus there. Definitely protect your arm in a crash. But anyways, yeah, I'll get everything unboxed and we'll dive through it. Alright, so I got everything unboxed and had to do a little bit of soldering to start off. I wasn't going to do it all on camera, but I just figured I'd get everything ready. My ESC did not have a plug for this flight controller. Tmotor's got different pinout than, or on this flight controller at least, it's got a different pinout than this Hobbywing ESC has. So and plus I'm gonna move the capacitor, and these are for the capacitor, and then I just soldered up my flight controller plug. So I got that soldered, and then I soldered these tiny little LEDs. If you're curious about how to put these together, they're super simple, but I can do a separate video on how to put those together. Those are for the Lume skid plates, or skids, Lume skids, whatever you want to call them. They got LEDs, they're going to glow, they're going to look sick. But what I like to do first is map everything out 100% where it's going to go. What's up, guys? At this point I'm going to switch to doing voiceover. I was having a hard time talking about what I was doing while I was building, so we'll switch over to voiceover and I will walk you through all the steps I'm doing, and we'll fast forward through the repetitive parts not to waste anybody's time. After I've got everything mapped out, I'm going to go ahead and put my standoff screws in. My standoff screws were actually entirely too long. I had to pull them back out and cut them off a couple millimeters shorter so they wouldn't protrude past the top plate. So now that I know where all the main electronics are going to go, I'm going to start getting ready to insert the race wire for the Lume skids. If you haven't used race wire before, it's super simple. It's basically just a through point for your wires. So you run from one end of the race wire to your ESCs just like a motor, and then you attach your motor wires at the other side. The motor wires are plenty long too, where you don't need any extra wires, so you can just cut the motor wires the extra length off, and then I'm going to use that to solder from the ESC to the race wire. And then once I get that mounted on the arms, I will trim the rest of my wire off of my arms and get a proper fit for the race wire. So now that all my wires are cut to the proper length and I've got my extra motor wires off, the ones I'm going to use for my ESC, I'm going to pull my ESC back off and start tinning up that and getting it ready to solder. I like to keep everything off the quad or work off the quad as much as possible. That gives you maximum room. I think this is preference for the most part, but I feel it's easier to work on the electronics while they're not bolted into the quad. Another reason why I like to solder while the electronics are out of the quad is you can angle the wires to make your build a lot cleaner. So right now I'm making sure that my motor wires are angled out the correct way so that they look nice and clean when they go into the frame. Now that all the wires are soldered up to the 4-in-1, I'm going to check with the multimeter to make sure that I didn't bridge any pads and make sure that nothing's touching. Now we will take the capacitor wires and map out where we want to put that and cut them to length and solder that up. Now we're going to move on to the Caddx Vista. You can solder on the Vista to get it ready without having to remove the top, but I find it a lot easier to pull off the top. It's just 4 screws and you can pop the top off of it and it exposes the solder pads a lot easier to get those little wires in there. When you're pulling apart the Caddx Vista, there is a ribbon cable or whatever this pin header thing is called on the back. You want to be careful you don't rip that apart, so when you're pulling it apart, wiggle it from side to side and kind of work it. I'll show it here in the video. Just make sure when you're taking it apart and putting it back together that you start with that edge or that side and the pin head goes back together. When you're putting it back together, it will make an audible snap normally. Almost all the ones I've taken apart do this when they click back together basically, so you know you've got a good seal around the edge of the top. I will be using crossfire on this build, so I technically don't need to solder up the last 2 wires, which is S-bus and ground. But if you have the DJI remote and you plan on using that, you want to solder up all of the wires, and that'll allow you to use the DJI transmitter. I normally just solder them anyways to keep the wires clean. I have the radio, sometimes I use it on different builds, so I like to keep the option open. But if you are just running crossfire or a different type of receiver, you only need the first 4 wires, your power, ground, RX, and TX. The last 2 again are for ground and S-bus, which are for the DJI transmitter. After you've got the Vista put back together, I like to put on my SMA connector. It's UFL to SMA or whatever you're using. If you're using just the standard Caddx Vista antenna, just pop it on now, and then the little safety metal thing that holds the antenna down, it's easiest to put it on the nipple first and then tuck it under the top plate and then put your top screw back in the Caddx Vista. Now we're going to move on to our race wire. I'm going to get all the pads tinned up and ready to go. Get the Lume Skids ready to put on as well. After you have your race wire tinned and ready to go, you want to measure and cut the motor wire running from your 4-in-1. Make sure you leave yourself a little bit extra room. It's a pain in the butt if you cut them too short. I've done it multiple times. I like my builds to look very tight and clean, and I've cut myself short a couple times. So make sure you leave extra room. I normally try to crunch the wires back quite a bit before I cut them, and make sure it's a nice clean fit. Now that I have my wires running from my ESC cut to the proper length, I'm going to strip them and tin them up and get them ready. It's up to you how you want to hold down your race wires and solder your motor wires to them. I found just using some zip ties, zip tying them in place, and soldering to them like that was worked best for me, but it's whatever is comfortable for you. You're going to waste a few zip ties. I wasted probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 zip ties doing this, but they're pretty cheap, so I wasn't worried about it. Now that we have our race wire soldered up to our 4-in-1, it's time to mount the Lume Skids and the motor screws. The Lume Skids come with extended motor bolts, but mine still didn't touch they didn't go all the way into the motor threads. I ended up putting on 2 longer screws in each of the motors and used the ones that came with the kit on the other 2. I'm pretty sure they're fine. I just like to be extra cautious. I don't want a motor screw vibrating out. If you do use longer motor screws though, be sure that the motor screws do not screw up into the windings of the motor. I noticed on these Xilo stealth motors that some of the windings, or whatever you call it, the copper that's wrapped around the motor, some of it looked kind of low, so a little lower than I've seen before. I'm not sure if that's normal or what. But yeah, just be careful your motor screws do not touch any of your windings. It'll mess up your motors. Now that we have all 4 of our motors mounted, we're going to measure and cut the existing motor wire to solder up to the race wire in the middle. Again, make sure you leave yourself a little bit extra room. I had already cut my zip ties off my race wire at this point, and I had to put them back on, so if you hear this part before you get to this step, leave your zip ties on. It helps hold them in place so you can solder to them a lot easier. Now that you've got them all soldered up and looking real nice, I'm going to use my final zip ties and zip tie down the race wire. You can use double-sided sticky tape if you want on the bottom of the race wire. I found that zip ties holding both on both ends of the wire worked pretty good. They seemed pretty secure, so I didn't feel like I needed to put double-sided sticky tape down, but you're more than welcome to if you think it'll work better. Now we're going to get our crossfire receiver wired up and ready to go. Like I said too, anytime I can, I like to wire the control or the electronics outside of the quad. It just gives you more room to work with, and two of the pads for my crossfire receiver on the opposite side of each other. So I'm going to route the wires. It just allows me to have cleaner cable management, or route the wires in a cleaner fashion. Now that we've got everything soldered up for the most part, and all that's left is basically to put the electronics in the quad, I'm going to mount my crossfire antenna and my SMA antenna adapter in my TPU print. It's a lot easier to get them in there while they're not on the quad, and yeah, it makes it a lot simpler. Then I put on my XT60 connector, and remember what I said about making sure to leave yourself enough room or enough wire. Yeah, I didn't do that the first time around. I had to take the XT60 wires off and make new ones and put new ones on. You do want them as short as possible though. It just gives less chance for them to get snagged in the props. And I believe too, the shorter the wire, the better the current flows. I'm not 100% sure how that works, but that is my understanding of it. Now that I have my new XT60 connector on there, I like to do one more check with the multimeter, do a continuity test to make sure that none of the solder pads are bridged together and nothing's touching. So now the last step is to grab our Caddx Vista and our flight controller and our receiver and tuck it all into the quad, make sure it fits nice and snugly, and throw our mounting screws to the bottom of the Caddx Vista. My print was a little tight, so it was kind of a pain. But yeah, take your time doing this part. Make sure you don't pinch any wires. Make sure everything's routed nicely. You also want to think about if you have to do any maintenance on your quad. So you don't want to make anything permanent or a pain where you don't want to have to get it off, or you're not able to get it off. So make sure it goes together nicely, and always think about maintenance in the future if you're going to have to work on something. Another thing that's nice to do right now while you have everything open is buying the receiver. If you're running Crossfire, it's super simple. Same with DJI. Most people should know how to do that. If not, you can look up a quick video on that. Let me know if anybody needs any help, and I'll be more than happy to help them with that. Now that we have the Vista and the flight controller mounted for the most part, I'm going to put on the camera plates. These seemed a little tight. You can use either direction if you're running a different style of camera. The side with the single hole and then the one pivot point seem to work or fit the best with the Caddx Vista camera. You can also use TPU prints if that works better for you. They were a little tight, but it seemed to work just fine with the included camera plates. I like them a little bit more than the TPU prints as well too. It keeps a little better protection from anything poking in there if you crash, getting a stick jammed in there or something like that. Now I'm going to use an alcohol wipe and clean off the top pad to remove any oil or fingerprints on it, and mount my battery pad and put the rest of the frame together. Put the top plate and the camera plate on there and wrap it up. After I've got the quad fully put back together, I like to go through and make sure all of the bolts are nice and tight. It's good to do this after your first Maiden as well. Well, you should do this on all your flights actually, but I like to do this right after I get done building, make sure nothing got loose. Sometimes I leave things loose while I'm putting it together so it's, you know, it goes together easier. But it's always a good idea to check at the end of a build to make sure everything's nice and snug. I also have the TrueRC Blaze antenna, which is the TrueRC's new LED antenna. I got one in green. They're super bright. I just happened to get a defective one, I guess. I don't know. I tried every which way. It's a pretty straightforward, you know, soldered up to the 5-volt rail, and the antenna acts as ground, and that's it. And yeah, mine was DOA, dead on arrival. So I reached out to Pyro already. I'm sure they will help me out with getting a refund or whatever. I've already got another one on order, so hopefully that gets here soon. But I was really hoping to you know, stack up the green with the green LED skids and then the green LED antenna on the end. So, but that'll be here shortly, so I'll post a picture of that once I get it here. Now that we've got everything built and put together, the next thing to do is to take it over to your computer and flash Betaflight, get all your modes set up. I will also have to do some resource remapping, which is because I mounted my ESC a different direction. I have to basically tell Betaflight which motor is which, and yeah, get the motor directions set up in BL-Heli32. It's a fairly easy thing to do if you just search YouTube for resource remapping. Yeah, there's lots of good tutorials already out there on how to get it set up. Alright, I'm out at a local park, just a little spot to do a Maiden. I brought a couple packs with me and the GoPro. I just did the Maiden with it. Everything went well. It flies great. I'm used to the 2207 motors. These motors feel a little bit underpowered to what I'm used to, but these are nice and smooth. No complaints there, and the rates are a little bit slower than I'm used to. But yeah, I'm going to slap the GoPro in it, and I'll show you some flight footage that I'm pretty happy with it. It turned out good. Check it out. Just wanted to take a second too during the flight footage to say thanks to Corbin. He's a good buddy of mine. He has been like a mentor with the FPV stuff since I started back in early January. Yeah, he's helped me out a lot. He helped me with this build as well too. He caught an ESC. I wired the ESC wrong at the very beginning. He spotted it right away just from a picture, and he also helped me with some Betaflight stuff, among a million other things. So big shout out to Corbin. Thanks for your help, brother. Love you. Right on, guys, that about wraps it up. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys liked the video. This is my first build video, so let me know what you thought. If I could do anything else better, I'm sure I can improve on some things for sure. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment and a like. I appreciate it. You guys have a good day. Peace.